Sir, my mom didn't come home.
The wind screamed like a living thing across the frozen ridges of Aspen Ridge, Colorado, the kind of January night when the mercury drops so low the thermometer gives up and the stars look close enough to cut your skin. And just before dawn, on the worst blizzard in 20 years, 7-year-old Lily Harper knocked on the heavy timber door of the secluded Blackwood Lodge with knuckles already blue. Her mother's faded Denver Broncos scarf wrapped twice around her tiny neck, snow crusting her eyelashes. And when the door finally cracked open, she looked straight up into the storm-hardened face of former Army Ranger Captain Noah Blackwood, 39, 6'3", shoulders built from carrying dead friends out of Helmand Province, eyes the color of glacier ice, and whispered the words that would burn themselves into his soul forever. "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night," before her legs buckled and the Colorado darkness tried to swallow her whole. If this line just cracked your chest open, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications because the next 4 hours of your life are about to be stolen by a story you'll never forget. Here we go. Noah caught her before she hit the porch, the child weighing nothing in his arms. Lighter than the rucksack he'd humped across mountains that still haunted his sleep, and he carried her inside the lodge that hadn't known another human voice in 3 years, kicking the door shut against the howling whiteout, the fireplace still glowing from the log he'd thrown on at 3 a.m. when the nightmares came. And he laid her on the leather sofa his wife Alana had picked out the week before the avalanche took her and their unborn daughter on this very mountain 4 winters ago. He peeled off Lily's frozen mittens, saw the tiny fingers purple at the tips, cursed under his breath the way only a man who once commanded men in war can curse, and wrapped her in the wool blanket Elena used to steal from him on movie nights, the one that still smelled faintly of a vanilla and pine perfume if he buried his face deep enough on the nights the silence got too loud. He rubbed her hands between his calloused palms, whispering, "Stay with me, kid, stay with me," the same way he'd once whispered it to brothers bleeding out in the snow halfway across the world. And when her eyelids finally fluttered open, those hazel eyes too old for any 7-year-old, she repeated it like a prayer. "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night. She went to the hospital in Glenwood Springs because my baby brother was coming early, and the roads were bad, and she promised she'd be back before the snow got deep. But she never came, and I waited by the window like she told me, and then I walked here because you live on the big hill, and Mommy said if anything ever happened, you were a soldier, and soldiers help people." Noah felt something inside his chest fracture the way ice on a lake cracks when the thaw finally comes, because no one in this town had spoken Alana's name to him in years, much less sent their child through a blizzard to the man everyone called the ghost of Blackwood Ridge. And he looked down at this half-frozen little girl clutching a crumpled crayon drawing of a stick-figure family under a yellow sun and realized the universe had just handed him a second chance wrapped in a pink puffy coat 2 sizes too big. He carried her to the kitchen, sat her on the counter the way he once said his own daughter when she was real and breathing and begging for chocolate chip pancakes, heated milk on the cast-iron stove his grandfather built in 1943, and while the storm battered the windows like it wanted inside, Lily told him everything in that soft mountain drawl kids get when the world hasn't broken them yet. How her mom Ava was a nurse at St. Mary's, how Daddy left when she was 4, how the baby decided to come 6 weeks early last night, how the ambulance couldn't make it up the unplowed county road, so Ava kissed Lily's forehead and said, "Lock the door, turn on the porch light, and if Mommy's not back by sunrise, you walk to Mr. Noah's house because he lost his little girl too, and he'll understand." And Noah's hand shook so badly he almost dropped the mug because no one, not one single soul in Aspen Ridge had ever dared mention his daughter's name to his face since the memorial. But here was this child quoting her mother like scripture. He bundled Lily into his old army parka that hung to her ankles, strapped her into the passenger seat of his battered Ford Raptor, still wearing his dead wife's pink fuzzy dice on the rearview mirror because he could never bring himself to take them down, and told her they were going to find her mom. And as the truck clawed its way down the mountain through whiteout conditions that would have grounded the National Guard, Noah Blackwood, recipient of the Silver Star, survivor of 3 tours, man who hadn't cried since the day they handed him Elena's wedding ring pulled from the snow, felt tears freeze on his cheeks while a 7-year-old girl held his hand across the console and whispered, "Thank you for coming to get us, Mr. Noah." By the time they reached the base of the ridge, the county sheriff's SUV was waiting with lights flashing, Deputy Martinez climbing out with a face that told Noah everything before a word was spoken. And when the deputy said, "I'm sorry, Captain," The bus Ava caught from the hospital lost control on Black Ice Curve, went over the guardrail into the ravine. We've recovered 9, but there's still 3 unaccounted for, including Ava Harper. Noah felt the old familiar rage rise, the same rage that once kept him alive in Fallujah, and he looked at Lily, now asleep against his shoulder from sheer exhaustion, and made a silent promise to whatever God might still be listening that he would dig until his hands bled if that was what it took. The next 6 hours were a blur of chainsaws and floodlights and volunteers and Carhartt jackets who showed up because word spreads fast in mountain towns when one of their own is missing. And Noah worked alongside men who once saluted him and now called him sir out of respect rather than rank, digging through snow packed harder than concrete, shouting Ava's name until his voice gave out. And just when hope was turning to frostbite on everyone's soul, a faint cry, human, impossible, came from under a crumpled section of guardrail 30 feet down the ravine. They rappelled down with ropes frozen stiff, Noah going first because no one dared to tell him no. And there, in a pocket of air created by the twisted metal of the bus, was Ava Harper, conscious, barely, one arm shattered, the newborn boy wrapped inside her scrubs against her chest, still breathing because she had used her own body heat to keep him alive through the night. Her lips blue but moving, whispering, "Lily, tell Lily I tried to come home." Noah cut her free with the kabar he still carried every day, passed the baby up first, then carried Ava out himself, her blood soaking into his coat the same way his wife's once had, and he refused to let that happen again. Not tonight, not to this woman who had sent her daughter through hell with nothing but blind faith in a broken soldier. At the hospital in Glenwood, they said it was a miracle that mother and son, named Eli after Ava's grandfather, would make it because of the human furnace that carried them out of the ice. And when Ava finally opened her eyes 48 hours later, the first thing she saw was Noah, asleep in the vinyl chair, still wearing his blood-stained parka, holding Lily in his lap while she colored on the back of hospital menus, and Ava's cracked lips formed the words, "Thank you," before the morphine pulled her under again. Weeks turned into months. The town watched in quiet wonder as the ghost of Blackwood Ridge started showing up at school drop-off in that same battered truck, as Lily's drawings began appearing on the lodge refrigerator next to the single ultrasound photo that Noah had never been able to take down, as Ava moved into the guest room, temporarily while she healed and somehow never quite left. And on the first warm day of spring, when the snow finally began to melt off the peaks, Noah stood on the same porch where Lily had collapsed and watched her chase bubbles with a laughing baby Eli as Ava leaned against him, her hand finding his the way sunlight finds its way through pine needles. And he finally understood that some avalanches don't
destroy. They clear the way for new life to grow where you thought nothing ever would again. If the first crack in your heart happened when a freezing little girl whispered, "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night," then brace yourself, because the next 14,000 words are going to shatter what's left and rebuild it into something you'll carry for the rest of your life. Hit subscribe right now, grab the tissues, turn the volume up, because this is the chapter where the storm gets worse, hope almost dies, and a broken soldier remembers why he was put on this earth. Here we go again, deeper into the Colorado whiteout. The blizzard that had only been growling the night Lily showed up at Noah Blackwood's door turned into a full-throated monster by the second week of January, dumping 4 feet of new snow in 36 hours and shutting down every highway from Denver to Grand Junction, power lines snapping like matchsticks, cell towers collapsing under the weight of ice. The entire town of Aspen Ridge cut off from the outside world the way it hadn't been since 1984. And while most folks hunkered down with generators and canned chili, Noah's Lodge became an unofficial command center because the former rangers still kept military-grade radios, a snowcat with heated tracks, and a stubbornness that scared Mother Nature herself. And now, 2 new reasons to stay alive sitting on his kitchen counter, coloring with crayons they'd found in Elena's old art box. Lily Harper, 7 going on 70 after what she'd walked through, and 3-week-old Eli Harper, a preemie who had decided to be born in the middle of the worst storm in decades and was currently sleeping in the same hand-carved cedar cradle Noah had built for the daughter he never got to bring home. Ava was still in the hospital 90 minutes away when the roads were open, her pelvis fractured in 2 places, lungs bruised from the bus crash, but refusing to stay down because every time the nurses tried to make her rest, she whispered, "My kids, I have to get to my kids." So Noah did the only thing he knew how to do. He turned Blackwood Lodge into a forward operating base, running on black coffee, rage, and a brand new kind of fear he hadn't felt since Kandahar. The morning the power finally died for good, he was outside at 4 a.m. in -20 wind chill digging out the backup generator, while Lily held the flashlight with both tiny mittened hands and asked if the snow was mad at them. And when he told her, "No, baby, the snow's just doing its job," she nodded solemnly and answered, "Then we gotta do ours." And something inside Noah's chest that had been frozen solid since the avalanche cracked wide open, because that was exactly the kind of thing Elena used to say when the world got heavy. By day 5 of the blackout, the town's only grocery had run out of milk and diapers. The National Guard couldn't get choppers in because of 60-mile-hour gusts, and half the county was burning furniture to stay warm. So Noah loaded the snowcat with everything he had: canned formula, the last of Elena's frozen breast milk she'd pumped before she died, he'd never been able to throw it away, his entire pantry, every blanket in the lodge, and drove street to street like a one-man supply convoy, while Lily rode shotgun handing out granola bars and telling terrified neighbors, "Mr. Noah used to save people in the desert snow, so Colorado snow is easy for him." And every single person who took a can of beans from the hand of a 7-year-old who'd walked through hell to find her mother cried harder than they had in years. Back at the lodge, the shortwave radio became their lifeline to the hospital, and every night at 8 p.m. sharp, Noah patched Ava through so she could hear her babies. Eli's tiny grunts, Lily singing made-up lullabies about brave mommies and soldier daddies, and Ava's voice, cracked and drug-soft, would say, "I love you bigger than the mountains, baby girl." And Lily would answer, "I love you bigger than the sky, Mommy. Hurry home before the snow eats the road." And Noah would stand in the hallway pretending to check the fire so nobody saw the tears freezing on a grown man's face. Then came the night the temperature dropped to 28 below, and the lodge's pipes burst, water flash freezing across the hardwood floor Elena had danced on barefoot the day they moved in. And while Noah was on his knees with a hairdryer trying to keep the cradle warm, Lily crawled into his lap, put her cold little hands on his cheeks, and said, "Mr. Noah, if Mommy can't come home because of the snow, maybe we should go get her like you got me." And he realized this child had more courage in her pinky than most of his old platoon combined. So at 2 a.m. he called in every favor he had left from men who owed him their lives. And by dawn, a Black Hawk from Fort Carson punched through the storm because the pilot had served under Captain Blackwood and still carried the scar on his neck from the day Noah dragged him out of a burning MRAP. The bird landed in the meadow behind the lodge in a cyclone of white, rotors throwing snow 50 feet high, and Noah carried Eli strapped to his chest in a makeshift carrier, while Lily held his hand so tight her knuckles went white. And when they lifted off into the black, the little girl looked down at the lodge shrinking beneath them and whispered, "Don't worry, House, we'll be right back." And Noah had to turn his face into the windshield so the crew chief wouldn't see a ranger captain cry. They found Ava in the hospital hallway trying to walk on a broken pelvis because she heard a chopper and knew in her gut it was for her babies. And when Noah pushed through the double doors carrying Eli and Lily sprinted ahead screaming, "Mommy, I brought your heart back," Ava collapsed into their arms sobbing so hard the monitors went crazy. And the nurse who had been scolding her for getting out of bed took one look at the 3-foot-nothing hurricane in snow boots and the stone-faced soldier holding a newborn like it was the most precious thing on earth and just started crying too. They airlifted Ava back the same night, the Black Hawk flying so low the pilot skimmed treetops to stay under the worst of the turbulence. And when they touched down again in the meadow, the entire town was waiting with torches and headlamps because word had spread that Captain Blackwood was bringing the Harper family home. And for the first time in 4 years, the people of Aspen Ridge saw Noah Blackwood smile, really smile, the kind that reached his eyes, as he carried Ava through the snow in his arms while Lily rode on his shoulders holding Eli like a victory flag. Spring came late that year, the snow hanging on till May, but inside Blackwood Lodge it felt like summer, because Ava's laugh was back, Eli started smiling at 4 weeks old every time Noah walked into the room, and Lily decided the cradle needed new blankets, so she spent 3 weeks knitting, well, mostly tangling yarn, while Noah patiently fixed every dropped stitch, a tiny blanket with crooked letters that spelled home. One afternoon in June, when the wildflowers finally exploded across the mountainside, Noah took Ava and the kids up to the memorial he'd built for Elena and their daughter, a simple granite bench facing the peak that took them. And he knelt in the grass with Lily on one side and Eli drooling on his knee, and told Ava everything, every ugly detail of the day the avalanche report came over the radio. How he dug for 12 hours straight until his fingers bled, how he'd stopped believing in God or tomorrow or second chances. And when he finished, Ava didn't say a word, just took the silver dog tags he still wore and pressed them into Lily's tiny hand and said, "This man gave you your tomorrow, baby. Now we get to give him ours." And Lily looked up at Noah with those 2 old hazel eyes and asked, "Does this mean you'll be my daddy now?" And Noah Blackwood, who had faced down Taliban machine gun nests without flinching, felt his voice break as he answered, "If you'll have me, sweetheart, I'd be honored." And Ava's hand found his and squeezed once, the same way soldiers do when words aren't enough. That night they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the peaks gold, Eli asleep against Noah's chest, Lily curled in Ava's lap, and when fireflies started blinking in the meadow, Lily whispered, "Look, the stars came down to say good night," and Noah kissed the top of her head and answered, "No, baby, that's just Elena and our little girl telling us they're proud," and for the first time in 4 years, he didn't whisper back. Wake up screaming at 3 a.m. Instead, he woke to the smell of coffee and baby shampoo, and the sound of Ava singing off-key in the kitchen, while Lily set the table with plastic dinosaur plates, because dinosaurs like pancakes too. And he stood in the doorway watching his new family, his second-chance family, and understood that some storms don't come to destroy you. They come to clear space for something stronger to grow. And when Lily ran to him with syrup on her cheeks, yelling, "Daddy, you're late for breakfast," Noah Blackwood picked her up, spun her once the way he'd dreamed of spinning his own daughter, and knew the war was finally over. If you're still breathing after the first 2 chunks, buckle up, because this is the part where the snow turns into tears, where a 7-year-old teaches a battle-hardened ranger what the word family actually costs, and where every single person reading this is going to need a new box of tissues. Hit subscribe right now, turn on the bell, share this with someone who still believes miracles can happen in -30 wind chill, because the next 14,000 words are about to drag your heart through the Colorado backcountry and leave it forever changed. Let's go. July melted into August, and the wildflowers on Aspen Ridge burned purple and gold like the mountains themselves were celebrating. But inside Blackwood Lodge, the calendar still felt stuck on that January night when Lily Harper knocked on Noah's door with frost in her eyelashes and a sentence that rewrote his entire future. And now the lodge that had once echoed with silence was loud with the best kind of chaos. Eli, at 10 months old, crawling at Mach speed across Elena's old Persian rugs, pulling himself up on Noah's combat boots, while Noah tried to cook breakfast one-handed. Lily starting 2nd grade and insisting on packing her own lunch because Daddy shouldn't have to make unicorn sandwiches every day. And Ava, finally cleared by doctors after 6 months of plates and pins and physical therapy, moving through the kitchen in one of Noah's old Army PT shirts that hung to her knees, humming Chris Stapleton while bacon popped in the skillet. And if you had told Noah Blackwood a year ago that he would wake up smiling before the nightmares could catch him, he would have laughed in your face. But here he was at 5:47 a.m., standing on the porch in nothing but sweatpants, watching the sunrise hit the maroon bells, while Lily slept curled against his chest under his mother's quilt because she'd had a nightmare about the snow taking Mommy again, and the only thing that calmed her was the sound of his heartbeat. The town had mostly stopped staring by now, but every once in a while someone at the hardware store would clap Noah on the shoulder and say, "Never thought I'd see the ghost smile again, Captain," and he'd just nod, because words still felt too small for what had happened to him. Ava's first day back at St. Mary's was supposed to be part-time, wound up 12 hours because the ER got slammed with a multi-car pileup on Independence Pass, and Noah got the call at 9 p.m. that she was staying over. So he put both kids to bed alone for the first time, reading Lily the new Mercy Watson book in the rocking chair Ilana used to love. Eli finally asleep in the crook of his arm. And when he carried Lily to her room, she clung to his neck and whispered, "Promise you'll be here when I wake up, Daddy? Promise the snow won't take you too?" And Noah felt his throat close because he understood now that trauma doesn't just live in the person who survives the avalanche. It lives in the children who wait on the porch light. He kissed her forehead, tucked the quilt under her chin the way his own mother had done a lifetime ago, and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere, baby girl. Not ever again." And he meant it with every scarred inch of his soul. But promises made in the dark have a way of being tested by dawn. And at 3:12 a.m., the lodge phone rang with the emergency tone only the sheriff's department uses. And Deputy Martinez's voice was shaking when he said, "Noah, we've got a missing hiker report. Teenage boy, 16, went up the ridge yesterday afternoon to scatter his grandfather's ashes and never came down. Blizzards moving back in. National Guards grounded again. We need every able body, and you're the best tracker we've got." And Noah looked at Lily's bedroom door and felt the old war inside him flare. Duty versus the brand new terror of leaving his kids. But then he remembered the night Lily walked through hell to find her mother, and he knew he couldn't let another child wait in the dark. So he kissed both sleeping babies, left a note for Ava that said, "Back before you wake up, I love you bigger than the mountains," and headed into the storm that had come back like it had unfinished business. The search lasted 39 brutal hours, wind chill dropping to 40 below, snow so deep the search dogs couldn't scent, and Noah pushed his body past every limit he thought he'd already found in combat, digging probe lines until his shoulder screamed, calling the kid's name, Ethan Caldwell, until his voice gave out. And on the second night, when hope was thinner than the air at 13,000 feet, he found the boy curled inside a snow cave he dug with his bare hands, hypothermic but alive, clutching a Ziploc bag of his grandfather's ashes like a teddy bear. And when he wrapped him in his own parka and carried him down the mountain, the kid kept mumbling, "Tell my mom I didn't lose Grandpa. Tell her I kept him safe." And Noah's eyes burned because he understood that kind of promise. They medevaced Ethan to Denver, and Noah hitched a ride on the same bird because his own frostbite was turning black. And when he stumbled into St. Mary's at 4 a.m. with hands wrapped like a mummy, Ava took one look at him and started crying because she knew that look. He'd gone to war again and come back carrying someone else's child. She didn't say a word, just led him to the on-call room, peeled off his frozen clothes, climbed into the narrow cot with him, fully dressed, and held him while he shook from adrenaline and cold, and the way he used to after firefights. And when he finally slept, he dreamed not of explosions, but of Lily's voice calling "Daddy" from the bottom of an endless white drift. And he woke screaming her name so loud security almost called a code. Ava calmed him with the same steady hands that had once restarted a stranger's heart in the bus wreckage, whispering, "You're home, Noah. You're home. We've got you." And for the first time since Afghanistan, he let someone else carry the weight. Ethan's mom, Rachel, showed up the next morning with her husband and a casserole dish full of gratitude, and when she hugged Noah, she whispered, "My boy says you told him stories about your little girl the whole way down the mountain so he wouldn't fall asleep and die. Thank you for giving me my son and giving him a sister he'll never meet." And Noah had to walk out of the room because the kindness hurt worse than the frostbite. He came home to Blackwood Lodge on crutches because 2 toes were gone to necrosis, and Lily took one look at his bandaged feet, climbed into his lap without asking permission, put her tiny hands on his cheeks and said, "You went to find somebody else's kid in the snow even though it hurt you, and you came back to me anyway. You're the bravest daddy in the whole world." And then she kissed both his cheeks exactly where the tears were freezing again. That night, Ava found him on the porch staring at the ridge like it might attack. She sat beside him, pulled his head into her lap the way he'd once done for her in the hospital, and said, "You can't save every child, Noah, but you saved mine, and you keep saving her every single day you choose to stay." and he turned his face into her neck and finally said the words he'd never said to anyone. "I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up, Ava. I couldn't save them, Elena and the baby. What if I can't save you three either?" And she answered by kissing him slow and certain under the Colorado stars until the fear loosened its grip just enough for him to breathe.
And Noah started building again, not just furniture in his workshop, but a future, adding a nursery onto the lodge with his own hands, because Ava was 6 weeks pregnant and terrified to say it out loud after everything they'd lost. But when she finally whispered it over burnt toast one morning, Noah dropped the spatula, fell to his knees in the kitchen floor, pressed his face to her still, flat stomach, and cried the kind of tears that come after a war is finally over. Lily walked in, took in the scene, tilted her head, and asked, "Is the baby going to be a boy or a girl or a puppy?" And when they laughed through the tears, she announced, "I vote girl. We need more girls in this house." And just like that, the lodge that death had tried to claim became loud with the promise of new life again. Halloween came, with Lily dressed as a ranger in Noah's old patrol cap pulled down to her nose, dragging a plastic rifle almost as big as she was. And when neighbors asked who she was supposed to be, she stood at attention and barked, "Captain Daddy, sir!" And the entire block lost it, because the ghost of Blackwood Ridge was now the dad carving 27 pumpkins on his porch while his pregnant fiancée handed out full-size candy bars and his son tried to eat the candle. Thanksgiving brought Rachel and Ethan Caldwell to dinner, because some debts can't be paid with casseroles alone. And when Ethan, now fully recovered, stood up with shaking hands and said grace, thanking God for the man who carried him off the mountain and for the little girl who taught him what family really means, Noah had to leave the table, because some kinds of gratitude are too big for one lifetime. December rolled back around with the first real snow, and Noah woke one morning to find Lily standing beside the bed in her snowsuit at 5 a.m., holding a flashlight under her chin like a horror movie, and announcing, "It's time, Daddy! The mountain is ready!" And when he asked ready for what, she answered, "For us to give Elena and baby sister their Christmas present." And his heart stopped, because they had never talked about going back to the avalanche site, not once, but Lily had decided on her own that it was time to stop being afraid of the snow. So they bundled up, the four of them, Ava, 8 months pregnant and glowing, Eli on Noah's back in a carrier, Lily leading the way with a determination that would have made any drill sergeant proud, and they snowshoed 2 miles up the ridge to the granite bench where Noah had scattered his first family's ashes, and Lily pulled from her backpack a tiny pine tree sapling she'd been growing in secret in the greenhouse, roots wrapped in one of Elena's old scarves, and she patted the snow flat with her mittens and said, "This is for your little girl, Daddy, so she can grow big and strong like me and watch over the new baby." And then she placed a crayon drawing sealed in plastic on the bench, stick figure Noah holding hands with stick figure Elena and a tiny stick baby, and a new stick family of 5 standing beside them under a yellow sun. And she'd written in purple marker, "We're all together now." And Noah Blackwood, who had once carried dying men through fire and never shed a tear, dropped to his knees in the snow up to his chest and sobbed like the world was ending and beginning at the same time, while Ava held him and Lily patted his back and Eli babbled, "Dada!" into the wind. That night they decorated the lodge Christmas tree and hung a new ornament, front and center, a silver star Lily had painted with Elena's name on one side and Big Sister on the other. And when Noah lifted her up to place it on the highest branch, she looked down at all of them, Ava's belly round with promise, Eli reaching for the lights, Noah's eyes no longer hollow, and announced, "This is the best Christmas that ever Christmased." And nobody argued, because she was right. And somewhere in the quiet hours after the kids finally passed out under the glow of twinkle lights, Noah pulled Ava into his arms beside the fire and whispered against her lips, "Marry me tomorrow. Not for the baby, not because the universe forced us together in a blizzard, but because I can't imagine a single morning without your coffee breath and Lily's unicorn sandwiches and Eli's sticky fingers." And Ava answered by kissing him until they were both breathless and saying, "Yes, 1,000 times yes, but only if Lily can be the flower girl and Eli the ring bearer, even if he eats the ring." And they laughed the kind of laugh that only comes after you've walked through hell together and found the other side has hot chocolate and forever.
So on the shortest day of the year, with snow falling soft and silent outside the lodge windows, Noah Blackwood married Ava Harper in front of the fireplace where it had all begun. Lily in a red velvet dress scattering pine needles instead of petals because flowers are sleeping. Eli gnawing on the ring pillow, and half the town packed into the great room wearing flannel and tears. And when the justice of the peace asked if anyone objected, the only sound was the crackle of pine logs and Lily's loud whisper, "Hurry up! My new daddy needs to kiss my mommy already!" And everybody lost it again. And later, when the guests had gone home and the kids were asleep under the tree, Noah carried his wife over the threshold of the bedroom that had been empty for 4 long years, laid her down gentle because of the baby, and whispered against her lips, "Thank you for walking through a blizzard to find me." And Ava answered, "Thank you for opening the door." And outside, the snow kept falling, covering the mountains, covering the scars, covering every place the darkness had tried to win. Because some stories don't end with tragedy. They end with a little girl's voice in the storm and a soldier who finally learned that coming home isn't a place, it's the people waiting on the other side of the door with their hearts wide open. If you have made it this far through the snow and the heartbreak and the second chances, then hold on to something solid, because the final 28,000 words are going to lift your soul so high you'll see heaven from the top of Aspen Ridge, and then gently set it back down in the middle of a family that was forged in a blizzard and sealed forever in firelight. This is the chapter where every wound finally closes, where a 7-year-old girl gets the happy ending she walked through hell to earn, where a soldier who once begged to die learns how to live again, and where love, real stubborn mountain-sized love, wins so completely that even the Colorado winter has to bow. Hit subscribe one last time, share this with every single person you know who still needs proof that miracles are real, because what you are about to read is the kind of ending people write songs about, pray for, and cry over for the rest of their lives. Let's go home. 5 years slipped by like aspen leaves on a warm wind. 5 Colorado summers that painted the high country gold. 5 winters that tried to kill them again and failed every single time. And Blackwood Lodge stood taller, louder, fuller than it ever had. The cedar walls soaked through with children's laughter, the kitchen permanently smelling of cinnamon and baby shampoo, the porch swing creaking under the weight of a family that had grown in ways no one could have scripted the night Lily collapsed half dead on Noah's doorstep with frost in her eyelashes, and the sentence that changed everything still echoing in the rafters. "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night." And now the lodge woke every morning to the thunder of small feet, because the baby Ava had been carrying the day they married arrived screaming on a February dawn so cold the windows frosted from the inside. A girl with Noah's dark hair and Ava's stubborn chin, and they named her Elena Grace Blackwood, called her Ellie. And when Lily, almost 8 then, held her sister for the first time, she looked up with tears on her cheeks and whispered, "Hi, baby sister, I waited for you a really long time." And Noah had to walk outside and stand in the snow until he could breathe again. Eli turned 6 and became the ring bearer who actually delivered the rings at the wedding without eating them, then grew into a wild blonde curls and a fearless grin, convinced the mountains were his personal playground because Daddy carried me off once, so they have to be nice to me now. And every summer he and Lily led expeditions to pick huckleberries, while Noah followed with a backpack full of Band-Aids and bear spray. And every winter, they built the biggest snowman army the town had ever seen, complete with old army helmets and carrot noses, and the neighbors took pictures because the ghost of Blackwood Ridge had become the dad who let his kids paint his toenails sparkly purple if they ate all their vegetables. Ava went back to nursing full-time, but only days, because nights belonged to bedtime stories and tucking in and kissing scraped knees. And on the wall of the ER break room, someone hung a framed photo of her and Noah and the kids the day they renewed their vows on the ridge, with the caption, "This is what saving a life really looks like." And every new nurse cried when they saw it. Noah's woodworking business exploded once people discovered the man who built heirloom dining tables with his own scarred hands was the same soldier who'd carried half the town through blizzards, and he hired local veterans, taught them to shape wood the way he'd once shaped young men into warriors, and every piece that left his shop carried a small burned brand on the underside, a tiny stick figure family holding hands under a sun, Lily's original crayon drawing now the official logo of Blackwood & Co. The avalanche site became sacred ground, a place they visited every January 14th, the night Lily walked through the storm, with lanterns and hot chocolate and stories. And Lily, who was 12 now and almost as tall as Ava, would lay a new pine wreath on the granite bench and tell her little sister and brother, "This is where our first miracle happened, and miracles always leave room for more." And Ellie, 5 going on 15, would add fresh flowers she'd grown in the greenhouse, and Eli would salute with a mitten because soldiers do that for heroes. And Noah would stand there with Ava's hand in his and feel Elena, his first Elena, smiling down because the mountain that took her had finally given something back. High school started for Lily, and she grew into long legs and freckles and the kind of fierce, gentle heart that made teachers cry at parent-teacher conferences. And when the varsity basketball coach tried to tell her girls couldn't play on the boys' team, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "My daddy carried my mom out of a bus wreck and raised me when he didn't have to. So you gonna tell me what a girl can't do?" And the coach put her at point guard, and they won state 2 years running. On her 16th birthday, Noah restored a 1978 Bronco, the exact shade of the scarf she'd worn the night she saved them all, painted the doors with tiny white snowflakes, and handed her the keys with tears in his eyes because the little girl who once weighed nothing in his arms was now old enough to drive herself to school. And when she hugged him, she whispered, "I'm only brave because you taught me how," and he had to sit down on the porch steps because some moments are too big for standing. Eli turned 10 and decided he wanted to be a helicopter pilot so I can save people like Daddy does, but from the sky. And Ellie at 9 was already designing tree houses that defied gravity and telling everyone she was going to be an architect because I want to build houses that never feel lonely. And every night at dinner, they went around the table saying one thing they were grateful for. And every single night, without fail, someone said, "This family." And someone else said, "Daddy's pancakes." And someone always said, "The night the snow brought us together." High school acceptances came for Lily, and she got into the Air Force Academy on a full ride because her essay about walking through a blizzard to find her mother and finding a father instead made the admissions board cry in their office. And when Noah read it, he didn't speak for 2 days, just held her every chance he got, like he was afraid she'd vanish. But on graduation day, when she walked across the stage in her cap and gown and saluted him from the podium, he stood up and saluted back with tears running down his face because his little girl had grown into the kind of officer he would have followed into any fire. Ava finished her nurse practitioner degree at night while the kids slept, and Noah quizzed her with flashcards at 2 a.m. And when she passed her boards, the entire ER threw a party, and Noah showed up with all 3 kids, holding a sign that said, "World's okayest mom, best wife, greatest miracle." And she laughed so hard she cried into his shoulder while the staff took 1,000 pictures. Eli soloed in a glider at 16 and buzzed the lodge so low the windows rattled. And Ellie's senior project was a tiny house village for homeless veterans that won national awards and got her a grant from the VA. And through every milestone, Noah stood in the back with his arms around Ava, watching their children become the living proof that love can outrun even the worst grief. And then one January morning, 20 years to the day after everything began, the snow came again. Soft and silent, the kind that makes the world feel brand new. And Noah woke before dawn to find the bed empty beside him, the house quiet in a way that it hadn't been since the kids were small. And when he walked into the great room, he found Ava standing at the window in one of his old flannel shirts, watching the flakes fall exactly like she had that first morning all those years ago. And she turned, with tears on her cheeks, and held out a little white stick with 2 pink lines and whispered, "Looks like the mountain's not done giving us miracles yet." And Noah, 59 years old, knees creaky from too many mountains and too many carried lives, fell to his knees right there on the same rug where he'd once warmed a half-frozen little girl and sobbed into Ava's stomach because some gifts are too big for words. 9 months later, on the exact anniversary of the night Lily knocked on the door, Ava gave birth to their 4th child, another girl, and they named her Lily Harper Blackwood, after the sister who started it all. And when Big Lily, now a captain herself, held her tiny namesake for the first time, she looked at Noah and said, "You kept your promise, Daddy. You came home every single day." And he answered, "No, baby. You brought me home." The lodge that cold night was full again, generations overlapping now. Eli's wife and Ellie's husband and a dozen grandbabies running underfoot while the fire crackled and the tree lights glowed, and outside the snow fell exactly like it had that first night, soft and forgiving. And inside, Noah and Ava, gray-haired and still holding hands like teenagers, sat on the couch with little Lily Harper II asleep on Noah's chest the same way her namesake once had, and Ava leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever think about that night?" And Noah kissed her temple, looked around at the life they'd built from ashes, and answered, "Every single day. And every single day I thank God you sent your daughter through a blizzard to find me." And somewhere in the quiet, if you listen close, you could almost hear a tiny voice on the wind saying, "Thank you for opening the door." Because some stories don't end with "once upon a time." They end with a soldier who finally found his way home, a mother who never stopped fighting, and a little girl who taught them both that the fiercest kind of bravery is knocking on a stranger's door in the middle of a storm and asking to be loved. And 20 years later, the porch light at Blackwood Lodge still burns every single night, just in case someone else is walking through the snow looking for the way home. Because Noah Blackwood knows better than anyone that sometimes all it takes is one open door, one heartbeat that refuses to quit, and one tiny voice brave enough to say, "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night," to turn the coldest night in Colorado into the warmest forever after the world has ever seen.